Number 10 is alligators in the sewer. This urban legend has been around since the late 1920s and has no truth at all. The story is that tourists who travel to Florida and return home, specifically to New York City in most cases, bring with them a baby alligator. As a baby, the tiny little thing is cute and harmless, but as it gets bigger and bigger, it was unsafe to keep as a pet. So like anything you don't want, it was believed that the owners of these pet alligators would just flush their little buddies down the toilet. The alligators would then grow up in the sewers and terrorize anyone who would disturb them, including city workers. There's never been a case of an alligator in a sewer in New York. However, back in August of 2010, New Yorkers did find a 2-foot alligator in the streets. It was a baby at the time, and no one was able to confirm whether or not the gator came from the sewer, but I'm gonna say it's highly unlikely. Especially at only 2 feet long and its small size, I'm sure a group of rats would be able to kill it if they worked together. Number 9 is the dead boyfriend. It already sounds pretty scary, huh? The story is that a boyfriend and a girlfriend drive out to a secluded area so they can make out where no one would see them. When they're done making out, I don't know when you decide you've made out enough and it's time to go home, but regardless, the boyfriend tells his girlfriend he'll be right back. Most stories say he either has to pee or wants to have a cigarette. After about 5 minutes of waiting for him, the girl gets out of the car to look for him and sees a shadowy figure moving towards the car. Out of fear, she gets into the driver's seat and locks the door, but starts hearing a squeaking sound. After a few squeaks, the girl gets so scared that she actually drives off without her boyfriend, but can't go anywhere because someone tied the bumper of her car to a tree. Upon flooring the gas, she hears a scream and gets out of the car to see her boyfriend hanging from a tree. The squeaking turned out to be his shoes on the roof of the car. Moving into number 8 is the vanishing hitchhiker. This is the story of a young couple who pick up a young-looking hitchhiker on the way to their destination one night on a very dark and winding road. Guess that helps make the story a little scarier. Either way, upon picking up the hitchhiker, which is usually a girl, but that doesn't really matter much, the couple is told to drop her off at a house just up the road where she lives. Upon arriving at the house and pulling into the driveway, the couple turns around to find the young hitchhiker to be completely gone, just vanished into thin air. When they knock on the door of the house that was claimed to be the hitchhiker's, the parents of the young girl, or boy, open the door and explain that the young girl, or boy, died on the same road the couple claimed to pick her up 5 years ago in a hit and run. Again, the number of years can change, but still pretty creepy stuff. The story goes on to say that the ghost of the girl is trying to find the person that murdered her. She died in a hit and run and the driver was never found, so the story says that the ghost is still trying to find her murderer. Number 7, humans can lick too. Sounds creepy? Well, it definitely is. This is the story of a young child who was given a dog as a present to keep her company while her parents are away on vacation. One night while the child is sleeping, she hears a drip sound that suddenly wakes her up. She goes to the bathroom and tightens the handle of the sink to stop it from dripping. She then decides to go back to bed. Her hand hangs off of the bed and her dog licks it until she wakes back up again to hear a dripping noise. This happens a few times with the girl going to different rooms to try to find the source of this dripping each time. And every time she goes back to bed, her hand hangs off the bed and her dog licks her hand. The final time she gets up to find where the dripping noise is coming from, she opens her closet door and discovers her dog hanging there. On the wall, in what is most likely the dog's blood, a message reads, "Humans can lick too." That story was really uncomfortable. When I'm sleeping, I never let my foot hang off the bed, because humans can lick too. Number 6, the killer in the backseat. This one is super creepy because, although it's not true, similar incidents aren't unheard of. A woman is out one night either with friends or on a date, and she gets back to her car and starts driving on a secluded highway. She notices a car driving very close to her but not passing her. As she's about to pass her, he swerves back behind her and flashes his brights. The woman tries to focus on the road and just getting home instead of the aggressive driver behind her, and when she finally does get to her exit, she notices the car behind her is still following her. As she makes some turns and runs some stoplights and stop signs, eventually getting home and pulling into her driveway, the same car is following her the whole way, so she decides to run to her front door and call the cops. As she's running out of her car, the man in the car behind her tells her to get in the house, lock the door, and call the cops. When the cops arrived, it came to light the man following her actually saved her life. When he pulled behind her, he saw a silhouette of a man with a butcher knife in her back seat, and when he flashed his brights to get the driver's attention, the figure behind her crouched down not to be seen by the woman. Although the story isn't true, there have been stories of robberies and assaults similar to this, so I guess the moral of the story is always lock your doors and look behind you in case there's a killer with a butcher knife or a robber. Number 5 has been referenced in movies, TV shows, and songs. The kidney heist is the short name, but you guys may know of it as something a little different. This is the story of someone drinking alone at the bar, usually on a business trip, who befriends a total stranger. After having some good conversation and a few drinks, the victim wakes up the next morning in a bathtub full of ice. Some versions of the story say the victim goes to the hospital with terrible lower back pain to find out their kidney has been removed, while others will actually just look in the mirror and simply see stitches where their kidneys would be. The conclusion of the story is always that someone, somehow, removed the victim's kidneys to sell them on the black market, and it's always done in a professional manner. So this person isn't gonna die, and they have a perfectly sewn up patch on their back. It's kind of weird, but not necessarily true. There haven't been any claims or reports of this ever actually happening, although there have been a lot of hoax and pranks about it. Number 4 is similar to a previous story, but slightly different. Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light? This is a story of a girl and a roommate that are two different types of people. The roommate is the bookworm type that would rather stay in studying on a Saturday night, whereas the girl is a party animal who likes to go out and have a good time. This is the exact situation one Saturday night, and upon returning late at night, the girl who went out to party decides to get right into bed, assuming her roommate is sleeping. The next morning, she wakes up to find her roommate slaughtered with a message on the wall written in blood that reads, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" Now we're down to the top 3 most notorious urban legends. These aren't necessarily the scariest or most believable, but the most talked about for sure. So let me introduce you to number 3, The Man and the Babysitter. This story's been turned into a movie and is just really an unsettling story. A couple hire a teenage babysitter to watch their kids as they go out for dinner. The parents are ready to put the children to sleep, so the babysitter doesn't have much work to do and can focus on her schoolwork. While she's working away, she gets a call and the voice on the other end of the phone asks, "Have you checked the children?" and then hangs up. At first she thinks maybe it's her boyfriend or just a friend playing a prank, or even the parents asking if their kids are okay. After a few more phone calls asking about the children in the same creepy voice, she gets scared and calls 911. They claim it's a prank and it's nothing to worry about, but more calls come in and eventually the dispatcher tells the babysitter they'll trace the call if the man calls back again. Finally she gets a call and the man who repeatedly asked her, "Have you checked the children?" switches it up and says, "Why haven't you checked the children?" This is implying that he could see her, which is just bad. The next call she gets is from a dispatcher who tells the babysitter the call was traced from inside the house and to get out. Upon opening the front door, she runs into a policeman who has his gun drawn. The police then enter the house to find a man covered in blood and 3 dead children. Like, I don't know how I slept last night. Number 2 is the story of Bloody Mary. This urban legend says if you look in the mirror and say Bloody Mary 3 times, her ghost will appear behind you and will kill you. Well, that's one of the versions. Other versions say she'll rip your eyes out, choke you, pretty much anything you wouldn't want to happen to you. The story of Mary is that she was just a young woman that people claimed to be possessed or a witch, and because of this was executed. Now whenever someone says her name 3 times in a mirror, her ghost comes back to haunt them. Another version says that Mary was involved in a horrific accident and wasn't allowed to be seen or even see her own reflection. Either way, it's not something I'm gonna try anytime soon. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Down to number 1, what is the most notorious urban legend? Well, it's none other than the Slender Man. The story of the Slender Man is a white figure with abnormally long limbs, no face, and a black suit that hunts children. He lives in the woods and has been compared to a modern day boogeyman. There was even a game made about him, which is what really gave him his rise to fame. The story is that those that are attacked by the Slender Man are left paralyzed if they look at him right in the face or lack thereof. Other stories say that the Slender Man is known to be near you if you start having nightmares about him. I will say I've played the game and I will never do so again. The really scary part is 2 girls actually tried to kill their friend because the Slender Man told them to do so. They were arrested and I believe are currently in custody, but still. That's pretty messed up.
A scary urban legend about the Bunny Man turns out to be true. A bridge on Colchester Road in the Fairfax County is known as one of the most dangerous locations in all of Northern Virginia. But not due to any normal fears, it's labeled as a dangerous spot because of its history surrounding the urban legend of the Bunny Man. And as the legend goes, in 1904 there was a mental asylum located not too far from the bridge, and because the residents didn't want mental patients wandering near their homes, they voted to have it shut down. And while the patients were being transported by bus to a nearby prison, reports say that the bus swerved off the road and crashed. As the story goes, the police were able to locate all of the inmates except for one. The one they didn't catch was Douglas Griffin. Not too long after, rabbit corpses began popping up all over the woods, to which some believe Douglas was using to stay alive. He also would oddly display them by hanging them from the bridge. It's believed that after that incident on one Halloween night, Douglas attacked and killed a group of teens who were hanging out near the bridge. And after he killed the kids, they were then gutted and hung from the bridge in a similar fashion to the rabbits, making most people believe that he was responsible for the murders. Now, critics of the urban legends say that there was no asylum in that area, and the idea of a bus on the road at that time is pretty far-fetched. However, most urban legends grow like a game of broken telephone, but all begin with a morsel of truth. A man named Brian Conley, who worked as an archivist for Fairfax County, was sick and tired of telling people that they didn't know if the Bunny Man was real or not. So he dove into the county's history to find the truth. And what he found was shocking to say the least. In 1970, a couple had parked not too far from the overpass and had a scary encounter with the Bunny Man. A man dressed in white with something on his head began yelling at the couple, saying they were trespassing, and then threw a hatchet at their car window. Of course, when retold, that something on his head morphed into bunny ears. A second sighting of the Bunny Man also appeared 2 weeks after the incident, when a security guard reported seeing a man wielding a hatchet as he was chipping away at a porch railing. As you could imagine, these reports soon transformed into stories that kids would tell each other to strike fear into their friends during Halloween. The madman soon became a man in a bunny suit who would chase children through the woods with a hatchet. Many refused to believe Conley, saying that the county must be trying to cover up evidence, but if anyone has taken part in a rumor, you'll know how fast the stories can change. Conley says while it's fun to debunk the Bunny Man legend, it's even more fun to believe it. Today, the Bunny Man urban legend has spread far and wide with merchandise, Bunny Man beer, and even its own horror movie franchise. While he may not have been wearing bunny ears, the idea of a man throwing a hatchet at someone's car window because they were trespassing is equally terrifying. An urban legend about a 17-year-old who built a nuclear reactor in his backyard turns out to be true. This is one of those stories that you say to yourself, there's no way in hell this could be true. Usually urban legends are pure fiction that someone at some point just made up for no reason, but upon searching this story on the popular fact-checking website known as Snopes.com, we found out it's actually true. In 1994, a 17-year-old Eagle Scout built a nuclear reactor in his mother's backyard, which resulted in a Superfund cleanup. Now, if you're also wondering what a Superfund cleanup is, it's a program designed by the United States federal government to clean up sites contaminated with hazardous substances. Luckily for this Boy Scout's mom, it was established in 1980, saving her a ton of cleanup. In 1991, the Boy Scout named David Hunt earned the first and probably only Atomic Energy Merit Badge. He earned this badge by making a drawing which displayed how nuclear fission occurs and by building a model reactor using, are you ready? A juice can, coat hangers, soda straws, kitchen matches, and rubber bands. Doesn't sound like much, but it was the spark that led to a much grander form of creation. And as a kid, David was obsessed with chemistry and even came to a scout meeting with a glowing orange face because he overdosed on a chemical he was taking to test methods of artificial tanning. I mean, and that chemical was Jersey Shore. No, it wasn't. It was a much more difficult chemical to pronounce, so I went with that route. He was also responsible for blowing a large hole in the wall of a Boy Scout tent after he accidentally lit up a pile of powdered magnesium. The reason his laboratory was moved to a shed in the backyard is hilarious as well. One night he was in his parents' basement when an explosion rocked the house, and upon inspection they found a semi-conscious David with smoking eyebrows after he ignited red phosphorus by hitting it with a screwdriver. After reaching the high status of Eagle Scout, David, driven by his ambitions for greater things, wanted to create a breeder reactor, which is an energy generating nuclear reactor that produces more fuel than it consumes. He did this simply by collecting most of the radioactive materials from household items and extracting the radioactive components. Hence the reason we need child-proof locks on cabinets. He even went as far as posing as a professor to purchase uranium from a Czechoslovakian firm. Han then took his radioactive radium, mixed in with his isotopes from household items, wrapped them in aluminum foil, thus creating a makeshift core for the reactor. Although it all came to an end when police received a call that David was stealing tires from a car in his residential neighborhood. When the police searched his home and his car, they found over 50 foil wrapped cubes containing a gray powder, small discs and cylindrical metal objects, lantern mantles, mercury switches, a clock face, fireworks, and assorted chemicals. David warned the police that his toolbox was radioactive, and so they called in the emergency response team fearing it was an atomic bomb. The Superfund cleanup cost approximately $60,000 and sent David into a deep depression. Unfortunately, this child prodigy passed away September 27, 2016 at the age of 39 due to alcohol poisoning. So kids, if you love chemistry, be inspired by this story, but learn from his mistakes. David acted with little to no regard for the dangers involved with the materials he was dealing with, and his careless actions ultimately led to his demise.
Disney World has a big secret. It's actually got a few secrets, but this particular secret is definitely one of the creepiest. Up until now, this secret was nothing more than a rumor, but it turns out Disney World employees actually have a protocol for dealing with this strange practice. Disney World and Disneyland are pretty special places, there's no doubt about that. They don't call them the happiest places on earth for nothing. I've seen a couple get engaged in front of Cinderella's castle, people get married at Disney World, and of course people celebrate birthdays there. But because Disney is so sentimental, that sentimentality can turn into emotional grief real quick. There's this strange urban legend about Disney World that involves people scattering the remains of their deceased loved ones all over the park. And that urban legend has just been confirmed to be fact by the Wall Street Journal. The employees of Disney World even have secret words to deal with it when it happens. So for example, when a manager radios for a code V cleanup, it means that someone's thrown up. Code U means someone has peed somewhere in the park. That's so weird. Like, I can see like a little kid maybe peeing somewhere in the park, but like a grown adult human, that's weird. But the code that's used for cleaning up ashes is HEPA cleanup. Whenever someone sends out a radio call for an HEPA cleanup, it means that a park visitor has scattered ashes somewhere in the park, and someone needs to go suck them up with a vacuum. This goes for both Disney World and Disneyland. I can't believe this is actually that common, that Disney actually has a code word and an entire process for cleaning up ashes. It reportedly happens about once a month. People smuggle ashes into the park in pill bottles and makeup compacts. Also, side note, do they shut down the rides to clean up the ashes? Because that would explain a lot. Listen, okay, I know this story's a little bit sad and I'm not trying to be disrespectful and all, but I can't help but wonder. I'm really curious, aren't you? So after a little more reading, I discovered that apparently rides do get shut down entirely when ashes need to be cleaned up, but the real reason is never revealed. So the next time Indiana Jones is shut down due to technical difficulties, it might actually be shut down for an ashes cleanup. According to Disney custodians, identifying and vacuuming up human ashes is a signature and secret part of working there. I mean, they do have to keep up appearances and they can't just have human ashes lying around the park. Cremated human remains have been put in flower beds, in bushes, on lawns, on Pirates of the Caribbean, and underneath the flying elephants on the Dumbo ride. But the ride that seems to be the favorite for people to leave ashes on is the Haunted Mansion. One Disneyland custodian said that the Haunted Mansion probably has so much human ashes in it that it's not even funny. Well, the Haunted Mansion just got way more morbid, didn't it? The idea of sprinkling your loved one's ashes at Disney World might be cryptic and creepy for some, especially since Disneyland is supposed to be like the happiest place on earth. But it actually makes a lot of sense, especially for people who've lost loved ones. Like for Jody Jackson Wells. In 2009, she smuggled a pill bottle containing her mother's ashes into Disney World. According to Jody, anyone who knew her mother knew that Disney was her happy place. So Jody spread her mother's ashes on the platform of It's a Small World near a head-spinning bird, which apparently is a part of the It's a Small World ride that always made her mother laugh. Later that day, Jody Wells felt so overcome with grief from the loss of her mother that she also hopped over the barricade around Cinderella's castle and ran around the grass, flinging ashes everywhere. So I will wrap up this video by saying that this is by no means allowed. A Disney spokeswoman said that this type of behavior is strictly prohibited and unlawful, and if you attempt it, you will be escorted off the property. Disney goes to a lot of lengths to remove any sort of morbid thoughts or messages from their parks. For example, back in 1994 they introduced this thing where you can buy and install a personalized brick, and apparently you can't actually use the words in memory of when you buy one of these bricks, because Disney was worried that the words would remind people of death. Have you guys ever heard of the Goat Man before? Okay, well he's this urban legend, and apparently a woman who was trying to find out more about him was hit by a train during her investigation. Her name was Raquel Bain, and she was on a haunted tour of Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville. Naturally, after hearing about the Goat Man, her and her boyfriend decided to go on a hunt for clues about the myth. Unfortunately, that hunt didn't last long after an oncoming train killed Raquel at an old train trestle. Somehow her boyfriend escaped from the oncoming train and was not harmed. So here's a little bit of of info about the myth. The legend goes that if you try to cross the trestle, the goat man will appear. That's why the couple crossed the tracks to see if they could find it, to sort of like provoke it to come out, if it does exist, that is. Reports of this hybrid humanoid goat man have surfaced many times, and it's believed to be a DNA experiment gone wrong. A researcher at the US agricultural facility close by named Stephen Fletcher mixed the DNA of his assistant with the DNA of a goat. Others say the creature is a demon or spawn from the devil himself. The idea of a hybrid goat man has been seen in folklore many years in the past. It even goes back to ancient Greek times with a character in Greek theater called a satyr. Interesting tidbit, the word satire comes from these Greek characters, which were usually the comic relief in Greek tragedies. The devil is also depicted as being part goat in the Bible. According to locals, the myth has taken several lives, and there's even chain fences and warning signs close by. It was reportedly responsible for the death of 14 hikers in 1962.